Now, the current solutions are essentially providing an understanding, which is a high level overall understanding over what happened in a large geographical area, while what we provide is this hyper-localized understanding of what happened what is happening on the micro level, right, on the localized. So just by reducing this perspective of the carrier, we're essentially providing them a lens which is magnifying the way that they can assess risk by 150 to 200x, which is massive.
Welcome to our series entitled the IAM Podcast, a podcast about innovation, business, and most importantly, people. In this series, we'll be talking to founders, executives, and various experts about their vision, challenges, best practices, and lessons learned throughout their journey. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the IAM Podcast. I am Mariah, your host, and today with me is the CEO and co-founder at Urbanico, Yuval Shafrir. Yuval, how are you doing?
I'm doing perfect, mate. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time and welcome to the show, Yuval. So, I'd love you to introduce yourself. Like, give us a brief background of your career, your expertise, your experience. Who is Yuval?
So first, Yuval is 32 years old, married to my awesome wife, Gal, and a newly father to a 4-month-old baby called Raz.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. In my background, so like most of the folks in our industry, I serve in an elite intelligence unit under the guidance of the Israeli Prime Minister's office as a product manager. So gained a lot of experience on how to develop a product from my military service. And then went to travel for quite a while, came back to Israel. I studied physics and chemistry, but actually never practiced work as a scientist other than, the university lab. After I realized that scientific research is not my cup of tea, at least, I went outside. I was working for quite a while in a consultancy firm in Tel Aviv, and then joined a retail tech startup as a hired CEO, a company called Tengift, in which I studied and learned a lot about the process of building a company, building a product, building a tech-oriented, I would call it tech-oriented product to solve a real-world problem.
Okay, so then Urbanico. So would love to hear, how did this idea come about? Why did you decide to start this from 0 to 1?
So actually, it's a great question, right? So one of my best friends is a founder of a company that works in the real estate domain, or prop tech type company. And during my work in my previous company, we're always kind of talking to each other and telling each other about all the difficult things that we're going through. And he was always talking about how difficult it is to get access to data that is essentially belong to all of us, right? Data that is being collected by the local government, which we are the investors or the funding source for the local governments. And essentially this data belongs to all of us. But there is a huge problem around the ability to utilize, both from an data acquisition perspective, but even more so from a standardization perspective. So every local government has its own standard, and when you're looking to work with local government's data, you're essentially looking at this wide zoo of data points and data elements that looks, behave, and act completely different, even though that they're talking about the exact same type of objects. And this issue, or this problem, this vision of taking this huge data asset that has lots and lots of advantage and utilize it for the benefit of building new products and services for essentially for all of us, the residents that lives within these It was something that still is obviously really resonates with my personal passion. So I decided to jump right in, and after a few conversations with quite a few industry leaders, um, pretty much identified that there's a huge problem, both a technical and business oriented problem that I believe it needs to be solved.
Okay, yes. You spoke about the problem that you tried to solve. So, where did you apply this first? I mean, this kind of solution.
So I think maybe even before that, I think that the vision or the northern star that we're aiming to achieve or that we're aiming to get in Urbanico is essentially building a coherent data representation of urban landscape, right? So having the ability to describe every geographical cell in every city around the world or in every metro area around the world using data or using a specific vector. Now, given the fact that local governments or the cities are essentially touching, I would say, almost every aspect of living within our life, right, as people that reside within these areas. So obviously, as you briefly stated, it can be utilized in many different industries and domains. And the first thing that we've done in Urbanico was actually going out there and talking to many different experts to see where the value of our data or the local government's data is the biggest and the most significant. And after a few rounds with quite a few different industry and leaders, we've identified that the best utilization method for this data is actually in insurance. And the problem is as follows, right? So insurance is an industry that has always maintained a value chain that significantly relies on people. And given the fact that data is such a critical and fundamental component within this business model called insurance, it is essentially touching almost every different insurance product that you can think of, right? So whether it is homeowners insurance product, auto insurance product, commercial insurance product, or any other type of product, it is highly bound to the data that it's relying on. And the current problem is that insurance carriers are still providing their risk assessment based on a very, very high level perspective of the insured entity. And given the fact that, through our data, we are actually able to provide much more personalized coverage that is touching the specific risk of Yuval or of May or of whatever type of entity out there. It has a huge potential first for reducing the prices that we're all paying for insurance premiums. And on the other side, right, on the flip side, provide better insurance products that are more profitable and that touch the risk that every entity have in a very granular fashion. And so what we're doing, if we want to kind of distill it, is we're providing a hyper-localized data to insurance carriers that allows them to underwrite and price insurance products in a very, very personalized and granular fashion.
Okay, yes. Hyper localized, much more personalized data that can impact the insurance industry. So, could you walk us through, give us an example, like a concrete example of how you solve problems?
Of course. So the most immediate one is actually bound to the first product that we've launched recently, which is a crime prediction. So currently, the way that the most advanced insurance carrier in the world assess crime-oriented risk is based on the zip code of the insured entity, meaning that Yuval is going to State Farm or to Liberty Mutual or to any of those large insurance carriers. They would ask me, when I'm coming to them saying, look, I want to buy an insurance coverage for my business, let's say, they would ask me, all right, so what's the address of your business? And then based on the zip code component, they can rate me for whatever, right? 8 out of 10, which correlates to whatever multiply factor that is multiplying my premium. Now, the problem of that is that zip codes is a mostly static geographical segmentation that was set up by USPS in the 60s of the last century in order to optimize mail route. And so when you're looking at the underlying data, it's super easy to see that any correlation between crime patterns and zip code is at best coincidental. And so instead of averaging out the risk across a wide geographical area like zip code, Urbanico takes into account the crimes that are truly relevant to a specific entity based on its fundamental characteristics and exact geographical location. And just by reducing the granularity level from a zip code to census block, what we're providing at Urbanico, a carrier is actually having 150x improvement from a personalization standpoint in its way to assess risk on the entity.
Okay, so when you talk about risk, so you're talking about, you mentioned about crime, right? Flood, fire. I saw this on your website. So, and what are the challenges? Like, how accurate? The existing solutions. How different are you? When it comes to that.
So it's a great question as well, right? So, given the fact that urban data is, as I mentioned, touching many different aspects of living, it actually predicts many different types of perils that are super relevant for a insurance industry, or I would say, for largely speaking, for almost every insurance product. Those type of perils are mostly crime, fire, water, and when we're talking about auto, then obviously car accidents as well. Now, the current solutions are essentially providing an understanding, which is a high-level overall understanding over what happened in a large geographical area, while what we provide is this hyper-localized understanding of what happened what is happening on the micro level, right, on the localized. So just by reducing this perspective of the carrier, we're essentially providing them a lens which is magnifying the way that they can assess risk by 150 to 200x, which is massive. Now, the challenges of that is always big, right? It's always big to do something which is kind of disrupting the industry, but always, I think it's even more difficult when we're talking about this large traditional industry like insurance. And so there's tons and tons of problems along the way from the coverage of the data, right? So how big is our data assets, or how big are the data assets that we have in terms of the coverage of a given insurance group of business, right? So whether we can cover 50, 60, 70, or 80% of the policies that are being sold by this specific carrier. This is a very big problem of any company that is providing risk assessment for the insurance business, the coverage. In another point, there's always this technological gap, which is a very, very difficult issue that we have around how do we build, or how do we let the machine build this coherent representation of the urban landscape. And it comes in a few different perspectives, right? So first, given the fact that urban data is a very, very much textual creature, right? So most of the data is text, and text that is being written as a natural language of the clerks of the local government, then we're seeing this huge variance in terms of the way that different clerks or different local governments are describing the exact same type of objects, right? So if you look at the way that the city of New York is describing its construction permits, that's one creature in the data space, which is inherently different than how construction permits are being described by the city of LA, the city of San Francisco, the city of Dallas, Houston, Chicago, wherever. And so having the ability to take all this data into a machine and at the end get the outcome says, this is the way that a construction permit needs to be described. And these are all the micro interactions that are happening between this object called the construction permit to all the different other objects is a very big technological mission.
Okay, and how are you overcoming these challenges?
So this is a very good question as well, right? So given the fact that most of the data is textual, then the main tool in our toolbox are algorithms that are coming from the realm of NLP, right? So natural language processing. The type of algorithms that are mainly used by our platform is a family of algorithms called contextual word embedding that are essentially allowing us to take any text and represent it as a vector in a vectorial space, right? By understanding and by taking all this textual component into a vector, we are essentially building a representation of any attribute in any given table. And then what we're doing is we're essentially inserting it into a similarity learning neural network that allows us to do two things, which are kind of the solve the problems that I've briefly mentioned before. So A, compare apples to apples, making sure that a construction firm is being represented exactly the same, whether it comes from LA, New York, Chicago, Houston, Dallas, wherever. This is A. And B is the ability to understand all the different correlations, all the different interactions this creature called construction permit is actually relevant to. And I give you an example from the crime group, right? So the platform that we've built identified that there is a big correlation between the fact that a given street has 24/7 operating streetlights in it to the probability of a crime to happen in this given street. Now, it may seem very logical to understand it, but there are countless other micro interactions that are naturally happening between the different objects that live within our city, right? So what's the impact of the fact that there is a very old tree that has deep roots on the probability for a water leakage in all the buildings that are surrounding this tree? Or what's the impact of the fact that a given business has a permit to work with open fire on the probability for a structural fire event in its close proximity? So there are hundreds and hundreds of different examples for those micro interactions that are actually fueling our ability to learn from all the different objects that live within this domain in order to predict the different type of incidents that are impacting insurance or any given insurance product.
Yes. So a lot of micro interactions, like it sounds complicated, like the process is, who's the perfect fit for your company? I mean, who do you work with? What kind of engineers or what specialties or expertise are you looking for?
So apart from most of our industry that is, I would say, mainly centered around Tel Aviv and central area of Israel, we have actually took a different approach. So our company is based out of Jerusalem. Our investors are here, and actually one of the main advantages that we saw here in Jerusalem is the fact that there is this huge pool of talent of the smartest people in the country that are studying in the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, which is I think the oldest university in the country and one of the best ones. And so the whole strategy around building our team is actually getting talent that is coming out of the university. So engineers that are coming out of the university, some of them, as a first hiring, some of them after a year or two of experience working with the company system, and essentially growing them within our company. right? So teaching them and getting them becoming the best engineers possible. So we're looking for talented people, obviously, that, as we like to phrase it, want to come and take over the world with them. Not in a kind of glorifying way, but we're looking for people that are coming with no fear and that wants to learn and try and make mistakes and learn while doing, because we believe that it is one of the greatest advantages we have as a startup, that we could build quick and and burn things.
So, but there are challenges that comes along with hiring, training, right? So can you give us a story?
Of course, of course. So there's always this debate, I think, especially within startups, around what's the best hiring strategy, right? So whether you want to take senior developers that are coming, already baked, right? So coming with their knowledge and experience, can deliver value from day one, but it comes with a lot of challenges on, first of all, obviously the resources, but even more important, at least for us, is the culture of the company. Right? When you're hiring a person that is coming with wide experience or quite a few different companies, it's very difficult to kind of, I would say, adopt them into the type of culture that you have as a company. And this is a very challenging, especially when growing and scaling up with regards to human resources. And so what we've done is that, we've essentially kind of looked at a few success stories that are coming actually out of the Jerusalem ecosystem, right? So how did Mobileye have group, and how did they hire? What were their human resource strategy? What happened at Lightrade? What happened at Orcom? Those big success stories that are coming out of Jerusalem. And what we saw is that there's this line that's connecting between all of them, which is bringing people that are fresh, that are coming with fresh mindset, that are eager to learn and to develop their own career and their own path, and kind of grow them throughout your company. So we have quite a few interesting stories here. I mean, we're still pretty small, but we have quite a few interesting stories here of people that came to us with zero experience and are now managing pipelines that are, I don't know, in the level of complexity of 10 years of work.
How many people are there in your team now?
So we are 6 people, right? We're still pretty young. We have 4 tech people, so 4 engineers, Yoni, my CEO, with additional 3 data engineers, as well as myself and Tal, which is our VP of insurance.
Okay. So, yes, you said you're fresh, small, but you're in funding round. In the middle of a funding round, you said. So, how do you plan to use that, or what's the plan ahead for Urbanico?
So we are now finalizing another funding round, which I hope we'll be able to bring out to the press very soon. It's a very exciting round that is going to be led by a strategic investor that is coming from the insurance industry with deep domain expertise in the US. And so we are very, very excited about the road ahead. And in terms of growing, so essentially the use of this fund will be mainly direct into seizing the opportunity that we're seeing. And for every startup, there's a quote saying, if you build something and you've got no negative feedback on it, then you probably released it too late, right? So there's this always the notion that we'll have to bring demand to our type of services to our type of product, and then create the supply, so building the product. So it's the best practice, to get and onboard as many customers as possible, even as a validation for writing the business code. But when it happens, when you have your demand exceeding your supply or your ability to supply, then it becomes a pretty scary situation that doesn't help any of us to sleep at night. And so, we're working with this huge corporations with huge sales cycle, very long sales cycle, and that we've spent a lot of resources to get to. And now we have a huge pipeline that is essentially overcoming our ability. And so what we're doing with this funding round is essentially going to market faster, growing our team, both on the business and technological and R&D perspective. So we expect to grow to over 20 people over the next year. And part of the team here in Israel, so the R&D would stay here in Israel.
Okay, so just a quick one. So you said you're an entrepreneur, you're passionate about building the product from the ground up. So what does it take to, can you give us 3 things? What does it take to build a product that really works and scale?
So I think that the most important thing, which is something that the industry is talking about for quite a while, but it's very easy to kind of lie to yourself around the ability to get as close as you can to product market fit as fast as possible, and to get as much validation as early on. So I'm a very big believer in the ability or the need to go out and sell your product even before you have one line, right? So just the ability to get this true feedback is something that was super duper critical for us in the way that we've designed the product, right? Just as an example, right? We've started in a model that is a data as a service model, which is essentially selling data, and then went directly to carriers and asked them, all right, how do you use this data? What do you want to do with this? How do you plan to use this data? How much are you willing to pay for this data? And then they told us something that knocked us off our feet completely. They said, listen, we have so much data internally that we don't know how to use, that we don't need additional data sources. What we need is coherent risk analysis, right? We need insights. And as good as we are with data, it's not what we're looking for. And so the ability to shift the product from just selling the data as is into building this coherent data representation as, I don't know, if you want to call it a digital twin of the urban risk, is something that we couldn't have done if we wouldn't have talked to carriers very early. So we could have done it, but it might have been too late in terms of, the resources and the like. And so the ability to go as fast as possible to your clients, your target market, is a very critical component that I believe is something that every one of us should take very seriously.
Oh yeah, thank you for sharing those. Okay, if they want to reach out to you, ask you more about that, your product, and how you can solve their problems, where can they go? How can they connect with you?
First of all, I'm always available on my email, which is yuval@urbanico.io. Super simple, as easy as it can get. And I encourage everyone to go and visit our website. There's a request demo button that obviously directs you into the demo and to our services. And I'm always available through LinkedIn and all the social media platforms. And I'd love to get in touch with everyone that's interested.
Yes, hey everyone. So please connect with Yuval. Thank you very much for your time on the show, Yuval. All the best to Urbanico.
Thank you so much, mate. It's been a pleasure.
This podcast is powered by IAMOps.io. Optimize your cloud infrastructure and CI/CD process with IAMOps.io dedicated DevOps team. Check out www.imops.io and get a DevOps team now. Make sure to check out www.imops.io if you want to know more about us. Subscribe to our podcast so you can get notified every time we post a new video. Thank you, and you have a great day.